Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New Liberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and I'm joined today by Matti Miranda, who is the Assistant Director of the Center for New Liberalism. And there's been some news today, Matti. There has been some frankly, historical news. I'm not sure this has ever happened before in America, but Joe Biden earlier today announced that he was stepping down as the Democratic nominee. He has wrapped up the nomination. He has got all the votes, all the delegates, all the stuff. But there's been this giant discourse around him for, frankly, for several years, but really, really intensely in the last month. And he finally decided he was going to step down. I'm just going to ask you first, like, we're kind of doing this emergency podcast. This is the first time we've actually had two emergency podcasts in a row, with the Trump assassination last week and attempt last week, and this one. It's been a hell of a news week. What was your reaction when you heard? Like, where were you when this news got to you, and what was your immediate reaction?
Is this real life? Like you said, it's been a really wacky time, and I just kind of felt like I want something precedented. I want a precedented day because we've had a lot of unprecedented events recently. So it was almost a shock of how many shocks we've had. But it was very quickly followed with hope. I personally agree that while the president was an incredible president and he did so much good for this country and for the world, it really is in the nation's best interest for him to let somebody else run. So I fully believe that by him doing so, we have our best chance to defeat Trump. And I'm really hopeful that we can rally behind a nominee and get this done quickly and get this done right, because there is just absolutely too much at stake.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And just some background for the listeners. You may have been wondering, for the last month, why has the podcast not been commenting on this? Why has like CNL not commented at all on this? And there was kind of a decision that was made to just we are not the organization that's going to be listened to. Our voice is not going to be the one that makes a difference. So we were kind of hanging back from it. But I think a lot of us in kind of the CNL PPI world had quietly been thinking, yeah, this is Joe Biden has had a very successful first term. He's passed a lot of big legislation with very thin margins, but it might be, for the good of the country, it might be better if he stepped aside. I think there's a lot of people who were in that kind of like that area, so to speak, right?
hmm Yeah, and I think also to tack onto that is that by saying something, the media has picked apart everything that is related to Joe Biden, and not just the media, but some of like the normal folks that we interact with day to day, just voters are picking apart Biden in such a way that is really, again, unprecedented. And by speaking out on something that could possibly make us not look united, I think was a little bit of a dangerous card to play. And that's, why I was very comfortable with us playing it safe. But this is the next 4 months are going to be a roller coaster of emotions, and we're going to have to work really, really hard. So that sense of unity is something that, we continue to keep in the forefront, I think.
Well, it's funny, I think unity has actually been a really positive sign, because everybody knows that I am far too online and I need to log off and touch grass a lot. But I've spent the whole day online, and the amount of energy that I've seen in the last 12 hours has been incredible. I'm going to say that the word you hate again, but like unprecedented for this election. There's been so much energy. People are, for the first time in like, it feels like months, people are revved up about the Democratic side, and the Republicans are floundering a little bit. Like they're not sure how to respond. Like Mike Johnson and a bunch of like weird Trump people, of all people, are saying things like, 14 million Democratic voters have been disenfranchised by this decision. Like they can't tell the difference between a guy stepping down voluntarily for the good of the country, and like January 6th, like a guy trying to hold on to personal power against the wish. Like it's very weird. The Republicans don't have any angle on this. They're trying, but it's
Hmm.
very odd. And I've been encouraged just seeing like the Democrats actually seem really, really excited. Like there's energy there now.
Yeah. And that's what we need, right, Jeremiah? That's really what we need right now. We need energy, we need enthusiasm, we need something to fight for and toward, and we need the right messenger at the top of the ticket. And still, it's going to be a very hard operation that we're going to have to run, but I would reply to something like the quote, disenfranchised voters, that I don't believe either, is that we are operating as a party. Nothing that we are doing is outside of what we as a collective Democratic Party has agreed is the way that we should operate. And this is like democracy at its finest, is letting that party be challenged and be healthy and unify. I think is a really it's really cool. It's really cool to see it. Hopefully we can continue this momentum, and keep taking the next right action. But yeah, I'm very, very encouraged.
One serious thought to that, and then one one not so serious thought. The serious thought is, we had a podcast about a month ago with some guys who wrote a book called the Hollow Parties. It was Sam Scholzman and I feel bad I forget the second author's name. I'm sure he's a great guy. But the Hollow Parties is basically a book about how the parties themselves are actually very weak entities in modern American politics. The parties used to be very strong and muscular. You think about like the smoke-filled rooms, and the party leaders would just choose who was going to be the nominee for president, and they were still kind of constrained by like this. They would have to win the election with this guy, but like that doesn't happen anymore. The primaries have made it so that it's much more the voters choose rather than the party elites. And they were just the whole point of the book is the parties are really, really institutionally weak. Like that's why Donald Trump could just take over the Republican Party, even though most Republican elites hated him. So, it's it the one thing I have to think when you talked about like this is what the parties do is that the Democratic Party, I think, is actually in a much healthier place than the Republican Party. The Democratic Party is still able to respond to stuff. If there's a
Hmm.
crisis, the Democratic Party actually can meet that crisis, whereas the Republican Party is just totally broken. It's fully a personal vehicle for Donald Trump at this point, and that's like Democrats when Bernie Sanders occurred at the same in 2016, same year as Donald Trump. Democrats fended off their extremist challenger, right? They fended him off, and they actually survived that. They had a good immune system for that, and the Republicans have not been able to. So I don't know. They're just thinking about like the role of parties here. It makes me more confident that the Democratic Party actually still is a muscular organization.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think it's really interesting because the current evolution of the party, I believe, is we're kind of losing that attachment to the party identity. Like a proud Democrat doesn't quite mean what it used to mean. But then you have this that we're seeing, and I completely agree with you, Jeremiah, on saying that this is a healthy exercise of our party and that we can rise to the challenge because we are a healthy party. And the Republicans not only were unable to meet that challenge, but decided something that really is building the legacy for the modern Republican Party, which is quite scary. And that's one of the reasons I think why this election is so important because, if they want to go do whatever it is that they're doing, that's fine, but we cannot let it ruin the fabric of this country.
I saw a gay bar in DC had already, like, literally an hour after the announcement, had a poster out that was like, "Come drink pina coladas," and they were being served out of coconuts, and that I thought was the greatest thing that I'd seen. Like, and number one, that's very funny, pina coladas, being served out of a coconut. But number two, I actually think that matters in a weird way, like that we're now having people excited to like make jokes and memes about the candidate, and like there's actual like energy to like Kamala Harris is cool, let's like put her in posters, let's photoshop her onto things like that happened for Biden in 2020. That wasn't happening this time around. Like
Hmm.
I feel that Kamala Harris is actually going to have more energy and is going to be able to run a better campaign. That the Democrats are just going to be behind her more. I don't know. Do you get that sense as well?
I do. I do. And for the most part, I don't have to hide this from you, but I don't always agree with the vice president's policies on some things, but she is incredibly smart, a good negotiator. She knows policy and said now, from what I can tell, she has a very good heart. And she does get people excited. And also, we have this opening for another place on the ticket where we really have an opportunity that I hope we don't miss as a Democratic Party to bring in some new leadership. That is also what really gets me excited. So not only can we get excited about Kamala Harris when and whoever that might be when we're ready, we're going to also be able to hopefully get excited about bringing somebody up to
You know
the
what I'm
national
excited
stage.
for?
What's that?
I'm so excited with Kamala and some other young person. Let's say it's Josh Shapiro. Let's say it's Roy Cooper. I don't know. Somebody who's relatively young. And
Hmm.
then we're going to be able to look at Donald Trump and be like, man, I just don't think you should put an 80-year-old in the presidency. He's just too old.
Yes,
He's
please.
losing his mind. He stumbles over his words. He's clearly not as sharp. I can't wait
Yes,
to do the
please.
same freaking thing that they've been doing for years.
I love some petty shit. Yeah, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. But
I got one more
realistically,
petty thing for you. I got one more petty
oh,
thing for you. React
hit
to
me.
this. Um, I this is partly a joke, partly serious. You tell me whether this is a joke or serious. I want your reaction.
Okay.
Kamala Harris, the cop, versus Donald Trump, the felon. How many commercials should we run with that theme?
Oh, the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, why stop at commercials, right? We can have assets for, I'm thinking billboards, baby.
I mean, it's perfect. She's a prosecutor. She puts criminals away, and Donald Trump is a 34-time convicted felon. Like that should be like front and center of like you want to win over centrist voters, just prosecutor versus the felon. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That seems good to me.
I in an ordinary time, I would totally agree with you, but there was a very lackluster response when he was convicted. So while I love your idea and fully support it, I was just so shocked by how the convictions they didn't empower him as much as I thought they had the potential to empower him. But I certainly thought we were going to get a little bit more of like, whoa, this guy maybe isn't great for our country.
It's odd because I think part of it is just that, like, because this was until very recently, this was just a rehash, right? Donald Trump has run for president three straight cycles now. Joe Biden has run for president the last two cycles, and also, was the vice president for 8 straight years. Like, Biden versus Trump is just such a known quantity. Like, everyone in America, to some extent, they already know what they think about Trump and Biden. There may be a swingable voter, like swing voters still exist, but like there's nobody out there who like just doesn't know who Trump is. Oh, well, this is the one new piece of information that is going to swing me on this guy. It's like everybody's already made up their mind to some extent. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and it's weird because Trump has been such a personality for like a million years. I'm a huge fan of watching the old shows that I grew up with, like Fresh Prince, for example. Great show. And rewatching it, I noticed the little references that they had to Donald Trump. And it's just so weird to see the the perceptions that people already had coming into this that I would not be surprised at all if you're completely correct that people just have they already know who he is, convictions there.
One person who I've praised politically over the years many times is Nancy Pelosi, and apparently Nancy Pelosi has done it once again. Like reports are coming out that like she was one of the driving forces behind this, like very quietly behind the scenes. that Nancy Pelosi was one of the major factors in terms of like really accelerating the process to kind of, I don't know whether I should say push him out the door, push him off the cliff, or whether just gently suggest to him that, the right leadership move would be to step aside, however you want to phrase it. Apparently, this is another like Nancy Pelosi special. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Pelosi's impact here?
I mean, she is the whisperer, She is the whisperer. She knows how to make a point. I will give her that. And I think that the way that she handled this publicly, can't say for anything behind closed doors, but the way that she handled it publicly was fantastic, and I'm sure that probably herself included, people were having very frank conversations because this isn't about the president's personal, what have you. But the data shows that the path to victory is shrinking by the minute, with you at the top of the ticket for the party, for the country. Strategically, this is what's best. Because at the end of the day, Biden is a very strategic thinker, as is Nancy Pelosi. Um, so, yeah, I definitely think we owe her a lot. Most
I mean,
likely.
yeah,
Maybe
Nancy
she can come
Pelosi
on the
is.
pod and tell us.
I mean, she's got a permanent and she's got a standing invitation if she wants to. And I say this with all the love in my heart. I say this as a positive thing, but like Nancy Pelosi is a stone cold killer. Like she would cut your throat to win a vote. She would like she will do anything to win. And like Nancy Pelosi will take a majority of three people in the House and pass like sweeping legislation, and she will get her ducks in a row. All of this just to say, like, Nancy Pelosi wants to win and she knows how to win. Like she's one of those people. She is an operator. And again, like all the love
Mhm.
in my heart, she would stab her own, family in the back to win a vote in Congress. And like I mean, I say that as a positive thing. Nancy Pelosi knows how to win. And so when she's saying you need to step aside for the good of the country, that's our path to victory. Like I trust Nancy Pelosi. She's been through the shit. I don't know. So
Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. Those must have been some very, very tense conversations. It almost felt like the president was really carrying a lot of this on his back. The responsibility to beat Trump because it's Trump is terrifying. Going into this year, the thought of a second Trump term being even worse than the first,
oh,
that's
and it
scary
absolutely it
stuff.
absolutely would be Project 2025. Like a lot of what was happening with Trump, right, during his first term was that he was ignorant and frankly kind of stupid as far as how to actually operate the federal government. And so he brought in a bunch of Republicans who were normal people who wouldn't do the illegal things he wanted them to do. Right? He's not going to have that problem the second time around.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be big and bad, terrible. But also, with Project 2025, that wow, what a behemoth of a document to try to process and then to try to convey to the average voter. That's a whole project in and of its own. But a lot of the authors of Project 2025 had appointments in his previous administration, and these were not like whatever appointments. Some of these appointments were quite large. And for him, a man who I have personally no reason to believe has any integrity, is saying, "Oh, I don't know about this project. I don't know about this and that." When he hired or appointed many of the authors, it's just kind of speaks to the integrity that another Trump presidency would bring to the White House, right? So not only is his policy taking away rights from myself and a lot of people around me, but we are allowing this level of integrity to be okay, and that should bother us. I like we don't really talk about our moral compass at all, but it bothers me, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Trump is a guy who lies as easily as he breathes, and like you said, he's kind of up at his rallies now, going like, I think he actually denounced Project 2025 at one of his rallies and got the crowd to boo it. And number one, that's really discouraging from the point of view of like he just lies so easily and people eat it up so easily. His fans eat it up. But it's also actually encouraging in a weird sense where like I think Project 2025 is breaking through. I've heard people mention it who don't normally talk to politics about me, like my non-political friends. Like it's broken through to them and they're like, "What's going on with that? That sounds weird and scary." And I like it's unpopular enough that he actually does have to kind of pretend that it's not him. That's a potentially a good sign. And but no, I mean it's scary how little integrity he has and how obvious it is, and just especially as it, you compare it to someone like Joe Biden, who is willing to fall on the sword, who is willing to do something deeply unpleasant for the sake of his party and for the sake of his country because he thinks it's the right thing to do. And it can't be easy. Like, look, Joe Biden has never lost an election. Joe Biden, every time he's run, has won, except that, I guess he ran for president, earlier on, but like he dropped over. Like he won like, I don't know, like 7 or 8 Senate elections in a row. He won with Obama twice. He defeated Trump. And now for a bunch of people to be telling him he can't win, like it probably took him some time to come to terms with that. But like, what a selfless thing to do, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and I even the language that you're using, right? You just called to mention the people that support Trump as fans, Trump's fans, and we wouldn't even bat an eye that we're calling them fans, but you would never think to call any previous president supporters fans, right? They're for President Biden, they're voters, they're working families, but I wouldn't say fans. I just think that that's so indicative of the nature of what is a Trump candidate, which
Well,
is
and
kind of bizarre.
what's the etymology of the word fan? Where does that come from, right? Fanatic. That's where the word
Mm.
comes from, and I think it's accurate in this case.
Yeah, very, very. I think when we look, I'm very curious to see how we look back on this time. I wish I was around to see that, but it's going to be, I'm sure, a very colorful tale on that. It's going to be really interesting to study the what happened in the Republican Party and just this like fanaticism of people behind this big persona.
I think in years to come that we will look back on this as like a reaction in the true sense of being a reactionary, right? Like the Democratic Party was moving left in some ways, whether it's on LGBT rights or in other ways as well. The Democratic Party has moved to the left over like the last 20 years. And, there's some people, it's not that I don't think people get drawn into Trump because they love him personally, but because they're turned off by the woke agenda or whatever. And you could debate whether like
Yeah,
is that Democrats, have they actually overstepped? Maybe in some ways they have, or is this actually a good thing and people are just having a fit over like proper stuff? But like whether it's Democratic overstep or not, like some people have been repulsed by this, and anybody who's just willing to stand up and fight the wokes, with woke kind of defined uh, like very ambiguously, like people just wanted that.
right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you saw the JD Vance tweet earlier today, I think, or maybe yesterday, uh, where, it was a headline on maybe the Times or something saying something along the lines of the GOP or somebody's upset because JD Vance is anti woke international policy. And sure enough, JD Vance, anti woke, all of his supporters were like, that's why we're cheering for you, et cetera, et cetera. No idea what woke might be in this case, but it also doesn't matter. We've just really tokenized this word to mean something very effective.
The new one is DEI, by the way. Kamala
Oh,
Harris
yes.
is going to be the DEI president, and that's the new woke. But like, I don't. It's very much a reaction. And look, like, there are principled conservatives out there. I wish we were having a podcast year where I was like debating the policy merits between Mitt Romney's tax plan and Joe Biden's Social Security overhaul. Like, if that was actually, like, my little nerd heart would be very happy if those were the two choices that we
Yes.
had. and we had lots of little nerdy conversations about it. But that's, nobody cares about Trump's tax plan. Nobody knows what it's going to be. He's going to give a bunch of tax cuts to billionaires, but he's going to like just stir up people's emotions about immigrants and about trans people and about crime and just the wokes, and then use that to like fight back against, to use that and essentially make abortion illegal and tax cuts for billionaires, and that's the actual agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very unfortunate, right? Because especially the way that just the way that we're developing with the science world, like chips, for example, LNG, um, other green energies and technologies, AI now, we could be doing so much more good than yelling at each other, and really putting on a circus. So, um, so I totally agree. My nerdy heart would love that as well. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I'm wondering, I would love your take on this, but I'm wondering, are we going to be able to unify and win? Like, we don't need to be right on the policies from now until November. We just need to win. Maybe we need to take a page from Nancy Pelosi's book, but do you believe that we have what it takes to run a campaign intended to just beat Donald Trump?
Oh, absolutely. Look, the statistician in me, the analyst in me, is always going to call it like I see it. There's balls and strikes, and I'm never gonna. I'm not a puff guy. I'm not going to puff things up when I don't believe they should be. I think Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump is probably a coin flip, and I think reality reflects that in terms, like, if you look at the betting markets, they're pretty close to a coin flip as far as who would win that matchup. I think it's a good thing we've moved, because I do not think Joe Biden versus Donald Trump was a coin flip. I think Donald Trump was unfortunately a heavy favorite in that, and we were very much on track to lose. We were the heavy underdogs. I think we've improved our standing a lot, and we can win now.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I think I agree, and so before that, on a kind of more technical note, folks are starting to think about, what does this mean for the delegates? There are already organizations that are trying to educate on this, which I think is really, really important. But again, a similar question, one of the feelings that came up is around this feeling of unity and the delegates in convention. So I would love your take. Sorry, Jeremiah, I'm flipping the script on you here. On how do you think it's going to go down with those delegates come convention?
I think by the time we've hit the convention, everybody will kind of know what's up. I don't think we're going to see convention floor fighting. I do think we'll see some level of backroom deals being made, just in terms of, in the Democratic Party there are groups. There's the unions, there's the environmentalists, there's different identity based groups like the Congressional Black Caucus and blah blah blah. There's all these groups, and you've kind of got to have allies in each group when you're doing major party actions like running for president. You've got to have a foot in each camp, and even if one group is not necessarily your natural base, you've got to at least be on friendly terms with all of them. But everybody at this point has endorsed Kamala. A few people are saying, like, let's have an open convention, but they are drowned out by a number of people who are just saying Kamala Harris is who I endorse. She's the nominee, and that number is so large that even the people who want an open convention will realize that, like, if there were to be an open convention, Kamala would still get 80% of the votes or whatever. And what will happen, I think, is, regardless of the technical aspect of the convention, right? Like, how does the procedure play out? How does the this, the that, the Roberts Rules of Order, bang the gavel and get people in? There will kind of be a common understanding reached through backroom conversations and through the media that, like, this is how it's going to go down. And Kamala will have picked her vice president, and we'll have all rallied around that person. I was going to say him, but it could, I guess theoretically it could not be a him. I think it's pretty likely to be a him. Um, but that's my expectation, is just like, when we actually get to the convention, which is still almost a full month away. By that point, like, the common knowledge of what's going to happen, everybody will know. We'll all know and it'll actually be pretty smooth. I don't expect much fighting. I expect that by the time like that we're so glad to have gotten through this fight, so to speak. I don't think anybody has the stomach for another long drawn out fight. That's part of it. We just got done with like this big intense thing that honestly was painful for a lot of people in the party. People want to unify after a big fight, and I think they're going to.
Yeah. I really, really hope that you're right. And I think that if that were to happen, then we have the potential of seeing a very different Democratic Party after November. For me and probably for you, for the better. I think we have a really good opportunity if we unify and win to really bring a little bit more sanity to our party as well.
Well, and let me ask you this, because you are a political strategist, you work in politics full time, you talk to voters, you're out there with some of these groups. If you are Kamala Harris's campaign strategist, and she comes to you and she says, "What do we need to focus our campaign around?" What's your answer? How would you build the messaging for the Kamala Harris for president campaign? Like, what should we pick? Because we've got this really unique chance right now. We can pivot to anything we want. We are unburdened
Hmm.
by the past. We are, what is that phrase? We are embracing what can be, unburdened by what has been. Like that Kamala weird phrase that she says all the time,
Yeah.
which is turned into a meme. We have this unique opportunity. We can pivot to anything we want. The Democratic Party can totally remake their campaign with 4 months to go to the election. How would you do it? What's your preference? What wins?
Um, well, I don't think winning uh, could be done by reframing the Democratic Party now. I think it would be a little too risky. Um, but if we can unify around the ticket, I think it's going to be a little bit of a wild card. I'm very cynical, Jeremiah, so excuse that. But so depending on who we get as a VP pick, we have the opportunity to really get some energy. I think right now through November, the strategy is energy, optimism, and change, right? Like even if we don't change the party before November, we have the opportunity to, like you just said, to pivot. As a party, we have an opportunity to pivot to somewhere that we can strengthen and be better so that we as a party are not in the same situation as we are with Biden and Trump. That is one of the biggest points of feedback that I was getting around this cycle is how did we get here? How did we get to a place where these two men are running for the highest office in the best country in the world? How did we get here? And we now have the opportunity to make sure that however it is that we got here, we don't get to again. And that is, energy of unifying to the ballot. And that's a lot of work to be done after November.
So, from your perspective, this is kind of like the party really needs to not so much like pivot its message, but like focus on like internal, like making internal changes to make sure that the party's unified and that we're built to succeed, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it might even, be bigger than that on how as Americans do we get to a more sane place? This has really brought out some really ugly parts of people. It's we've just seen extremism to just extents that are sad. They're tragic. And, how did we get to a place where civil discourse is non-existent? We just have a lot of work to do on both sides of the aisle, but we can only, keep our side of the street clean. So,
Yeah, I mean,
what can we do?
Trump is a fever, and I was hoping the fever would break when when he lost in 2020, and that does not seem to have been the case. Like the
Right.
fever is not going to break until he's forced to go away. But I don't know. I do think that we can pivot on messaging to some extent, just because like so much of voting these days is based around negative polarization, right? Like we were talking about people who are just negatively polarized against Democrats or against Republicans. And there's such an opportunity because all of the attacks have been very, very Joe Biden focused. He's too old. He can't talk. He's, stuttering, sleepy Joe. I don't know, whatever's been going on. And Kamala Harris, like, has very little baggage compared to Joe Biden. And so I don't know if I'm like focus if I'm campaigning this, I'm focusing on, like, I think you said, energy. Kamala Harris is young, she's new, she's energetic, she's a new generation. Trump is an 80-year-old man who, again, like, we're going to pivot to him being like the old guy who forgets people's names and can't keep a train of thought going and rambles and looks like he's got dementia. That's number one. Number two, I'm hitting Project 2025 every chance that I get.
Yeah.
I'm making that like the theme of the election as much as I can. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I genuinely think, like, just you've got to hit the tough on crime thing, like, steal that thunder from them in a sense, where if don't let Republicans be the law and order party when they are running a convicted felon and we are running a prosecutor. Like, whatever the right strategy for that is, maybe there's a right way to message it, but that's got to be part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's gonna be a tricky one. Absolutely. But I really think that it needs to be injected with a lot of optimism. It's kind of like you were saying before, with people might not have the stomach for a big fight on the DNC convention floor. We're tired of feeling terrible. The American people just need to feel good. And I think that Kamala Harris has the opportunity to do so, and framing those very important issues that you brought up somehow with some sort of positivity to the backbone of what we're trying to do here by defeating Trump.
So, vice president picks. Let's assume that Kamala Harris is in a war room right now, interviewing people. Who do you like for vice president? Who's on your short list? Who would you be excited and happy to see?
I would personally be excited to see Mayor Pete on the ticket, um, but I don't know, quite frankly, if the country is ready for a black woman, gay man ticket. Um, Governor Shapiro is a fantastic legislator, and I think he would be absolutely amazing. I think he could get some energy. So he would probably be my top pick. Question back to you.
I think I agree on the Mayor Pete thing, and it's disappointing because I love Pete Buttigieg. I think he's fantastic. I it's very cynical and a little dark to just reduce people to their identities, right? But, like, I think you're right. To some extent, it would be difficult to see, like, a black and Asian. Don't forget Asian American woman, by the way. First Asian American person to really be on a major presidential ticket, right? Um,
Hmm.
but the identity stuff does make it tricky. I also just think, just strategically, that Pete Buttigieg is almost better as a campaign surrogate than as the actual vice presidential pick. He's very, very good in kind of being able to, like, speak freely and speak just kind of off the cuff. And I wonder if he would be more constrained as an actual presidential candidate or vice presidential candidate. I think he's going to be a great surrogate either way. I look at
Hmm.
I think Shapiro would be a good pick. I also look at people like Andy Bashir in Kentucky or Cooper in North Carolina. We're picking a bunch of governors here, which I think is a smart strategy.
Hmm.
But, like, these are kind of very moderate Democratic governors who can appeal to. I've seen like one person, like, there's a picture of a wine section and it says, like, interesting whites, in terms of like this wine store, and somebody was like, hey, look, it's Kamala Harris's vice president picks, right? Interesting whites. But yeah, the whoever
But I mean,
whoever she picks for vice president is going to be like mayonnaise in a snowstorm. Like, let's be real. Um, so it's almost certainly going to be a white man, and that's how the cookie crumbles. But I think that I don't know, demographically and, like, ideologically, like, picking a moderate governor who has a record of getting things done and who has a reputation for being bipartisan and just sane and normal. Like Andy Bashir is people in Kentucky. That's a heavily Republican state, and he not only won election, he won re-election in Kentucky as a Democrat. Like he's doing something right. He knows something about how to appeal to moderate, middle of the road voters. So something like that, I would be happy with. I also think Josh Shapiro is a pretty good choice.
I love your picks as well. Governor Bashir is he's what's up. Love him. And you know what I just kind of thought of talking, sorry, going back to the point about messaging is one idea from the governors, and this is an idea that I've been playing with just on how we work on our own GOTV with CNL is I would love to see, as part of the campaign, maybe talking about some of the moderates in the states, right? We haven't been seeing a lot of other moderates um, even in the swing states. It would be nice to see kind of like this almost hope energy about change and new leadership and be able to have some statewide highlighted throughout the campaign as another signal of a new Democratic bench coming up.
It's really interesting because some of these things are so local, right? Like how you appeal to people in Kentucky is different than how you do it in North Carolina or on the West Coast or whatever. So like it would I think it's potentially useful, but it's one of those things where it's like you've got to take a 50 states view to some extent, right? Um, but that kind of thing can only help in building the things that we're talking about, building something with energy, something that's unifying, something that gets people excited, has a positive message. Um, I don't know. I'm personally more energetic. I really feel pretty good, at least today, at least in the glow of this. Maybe 72 hours from now, nothing ever lasts, and 72 hours from now, I'll go back to feeling how I was. But right now, I feel much better about this. Part of it is the energy that I do see on the Democratic side. Part of it is what I see coming from the Republicans, just because like they look lost. I'm telling you, they look lost in terms of I'm seeing. Hold on, let me pull something up. I had something where um, senior Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller, just great guy, peach of a guy. Jason Miller says that a major issue liability for Harris is that air quotes she wants to ban plastic straws. This is like one of Trump's like top 5 surrogates talking about freaking plastic like they don't have anything right now. They don't know what they're doing. They're talking about like cut like I think Trump actually was at a rally and he's like, "Oh, Kamala Harris is the worst. I call her Laughing Kamala because she laughs like she's crazy." Laugh, come on. Look, sleepy Joe Biden, as much as I hate it, that's an attack that has juice to it, that has some verve. Laughing Kamala has nothing. That's sad to quote Donald Trump, that's
That's
sad
lazy.
exclamation point. Like I'm looking at the Republicans. They don't know how to attack her. They really don't. It's crazy.
Let them spin out. Yeah, let them spin out. I just read something recently that the GOP is worried about Arizona now. Good, let them spin out. This gives us plenty of time to really get our ducks in a row. Like you were saying before, this is going to take a lot of like one-on-one calls by some very top level people to unify. And so we'll take the time, let them go over there and spin themselves dizzy. That's perfectly fine with me.
If the worst attack they have is laughing Kamala wants to ban your plastic straws, like then we win the election. But they'll think of something. But it's speaking of Arizona, by the way, Mark Kelly reportedly in the mix. I've heard for vice president. Astronaut Senator Mark Kelly.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to school in Arizona. My congresswoman was Gabby Giffords. Um, and people just love him. He's a good legislator. He's a good person, very friendly from what I hear. He'd be great too. And, maybe we can delve into Arizona at a future time, but we're going to see some stuff changing in Arizona. There's a lot of really cool moderate Dem energy there. And hopefully that comes to fruition. Things are changing and unprecedented at every turn, so who knows? But I'm feeling pretty good about Arizona. It's not going to like turn blue, mind you, but I think we're going to see some good stuff.
Unrelated, by the way, but like I my one of my hobby horses is the Democrats need to put way more energy into like locating astronauts and college football coaches and athletes to run for office because they have such a good track record. Like, why are we not recruiting every astronaut that exists to come run for the Senate wherever they live? Like, this is very cynical of me, but like, just go find some friggin' astronauts and make them run for Senate. It works every time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, but
Why not? Yeah, where do they hang out? Like after, after they go to the moon or whatever, where do they hang out? No, I totally hear you. And what I've seen, I haven't checked data, anytime recently, but they're just not the type of people that want to run for office, regardless of how effective they might be, because, you know, even more than we assume, running for office is really hard. And not just for the candidate, but it's your whole family. It turns your life upside down. So not a lot of people generally want to do it. And then when you go to a place where people are extremely passionate about something as wonky as, aeronautics or whatever, you see a drop in interest in running for into
mhm.
completely changing your life to run
And
for
part
office.
of me wonders if Joe Biden isn't kind of secretly relieved that he doesn't have to run this campaign because like again clearly he doesn't have the energy to run a full campaign. He's not doing a lot of events. He hasn't been. Part of me wonders if he's relieved and that he doesn't have to be president for 4 more years because it's not a fun job necessarily. And like he's going to be remembered, I think, fondly either way. In a weird sense, like if Kamala Harris wins, he's going to be called like the American Cincinnatus, the Roman dictator. Like there's a threat to Rome, and so they install him as dictator for like 1 or 2 years, and he defeats the threat. And then Cincinnatus, when the threat is gone, leaves Rome and goes back to his farm. Right? He's one of history's great heroes. He could be remembered if Kamala Harris wins. He's going to be America's Cincinnatus. He's going to be valorized forever. If Kamala Harris loses, he gets to kind of be like, well, told you. Yeah, so Joe Biden kind of is coming out of this okay either way, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, right? I wonder how he feels. And I sincerely hope that he knows that this is not a failure of any type on his behalf. Holy moly, it's wild to see how much of his incredible policy was not talked about on the national level, by either the left or the right. And we really did a disservice to ourselves in that.
Well, this
But
is there's an
um,
interesting point here actually with the policy stuff because like this is kind of a Matt Iglesias theory, I think, but politicians are sometimes the public, people who watch politics think you should be rewarded for passing certain things, when in reality the voters punish you for passing things. Passing big pieces of legislation spins down your political capital, right? People, you're more likely to make people mad than anything else. So it's like if you're doing a big piece of legislation, it better be because you think it's the right thing to do for the country, because people actually punish you for passing big, impactful changes. People don't like change for the most part. Whenever there's any new change, at first, people always hate it.
that's fair. That's fair. And a lot of, to tack onto that is that we also haven't seen some of the, I hate to use this, but trickle down, some of the funds that were awarded, for example, for chips, we haven't seen a lot of those
Mm-hmm.
returns yet. The money's still going out. The same with ARPA.
Well, and this is what CNL talks about so much. This is the need to speed government up, right? To permitting reform. It's getting the bureaucracy out of the way. Like it's the whole thing where we at CNL are kind of the moderate wing of the Democratic Party, but we're not against spending money. We're against the gigantic process of it takes 17 years to build a mile of rail or whatever the case may be. Like you got to actually do the thing rather than just have a bunch of
Mhm.
committee meetings. Sorry, I'm back on my bullshit. I'm
Absolutely.
back on my hobby horse.
No, I dig it. I dig it. And, that's a whole other podcast right there, too. But in a lot of cases, states just aren't equipped to deal with dispersing some of this funding and like being able to allocate it properly and to execute these programs, which is a whole other level of how do we solve this issue. Which again is something that I think we need to government reform kind of start looking at, not just our party, but how we're doing business. Not to knock the government, but a lot of like the systems are out of date, things like that. The fear that everybody has of AI. I feel like the AI conversation has just really detracted from all the usefulness that we could be implementing now because people are afraid that, you know, our robot overlords are going to come and take over or whatnot. But
I, for one, welcome the
there
robot
are
overlords. Praise be the robots. Please spare me when you
soon
take over.
enough.
Okay, we're coming up on time here, but any closing thoughts on your end in terms of it's been a wild week since Donald Trump got his ear shot off, and in these troubled times, it's so hard to get the for a normal person to get the ear of the president. But you know, one guy managed. Um, but no, it's
Yeah.
been a crazy week. It's been a crazy day today. Any closing thoughts from you, just in terms of everything?
Yeah. It's been a doozy. It's been a doozy. And I am more hopeful, and I hope that we can unite. We have an incredible opportunity to do good by this country. And we really need to balance that with touching some grass every now and then.
I'm gonna say touching some coconuts. We've got the coconut queen now. We all just fell out of a coconut tree, or however the saying goes. We live in the context of what has been. Um, I'm excited to be one of Kamala's strongest online warriors. I'm sure we're going to be coming out with some like coconut stickers and things like that at CNL. But I am hopeful. Is my closing thought. I feel a lot more hopeful than I have for the entire past month. Um, I feel a lot better about the race today than I did a week ago. I'll say so. We'll just have to see where things go. I don't know. Nothing to do but to you got to play the game at this point. You got to see who wins. So let's get out there and compete. All right, I think that will wrap it up. I want to say thank you to everyone for listening. This was, a emergency podcast. We are recording this literally Sunday night, like something like 12 hours after, less than 12 hours. This is like 8 hours after the announcement or something like that. Hopefully, we'll have this out to you by Monday morning. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you at the next one.